Next video comes from a topic that I posted in my group. But first, the disclaimer: nothing meant for illegal purposes or intended for illegal purposes. This is all knowledge, history, and some opinion, some experience, personal experience. Which, with this topic, I really didn't have the problem that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to call this video "Why Are Females Not Coming in Heat?" But first, I'd like to thank my friend Brandon Phillips for sending me this badass cap. That's his company. I know it's backwards, but it's called Grit and Steel. You can find him online, or you can search Grit and Steel. They have a website too. Little background on Brandon, how I met him. It was at a dog show years ago. And of course he stood out because he's a big old guy, man. I mean big, and not big and fat. He's big and fit. He was at the time. This was years ago. And like dog men do, we got to talking, and he just gave me a little background. I asked him about his life and what he does and all that stuff, just like he did me. But what was interesting is that he had a background in college football and pro football. Played for University of Arizona, and then he played for the New Orleans Saints and the Miami Dolphins. Throughout the conversation, he explained that what he's involved in now is sports medicine equipment. Not so much the helmets and all that stuff, but whatever stuff they use for surgeries and things like that, which is a natural progression when you retire. If I'm correct, he retired because of injuries, right? But it didn't. He still kept within that community, and I believe his wife played sports in college as well. That might have been where they met. Forgive me, Brandon, if I get something wrong, but it's all with good intent to give you some props because you deserve it. And so, again, being a dog man, owning dogs, and the natural progression was dog equipment. It's where the collars and leads come in. If you look at, check his website out, you can see, just looking at it, you can tell the quality. They're very well made, good material, strong, tested, just like everything else he's involved in. It would have to be tested with sports medicine equipment or his own equipment that he developed, and it's now available for purchase. But once again, thanks for the hat. Even the hat is nice. It's good material, fits well, adjustable, Grit and Steel. So check them out. This video again came from, I watch a lot of vids, and I do research in a lot of different things, and it always comes up. There isn't hardly a day go by where some question or some talk of females not coming in heat. And my relation to that is I really didn't have that problem. The only differences I would say was Sissy, who was the inbred daughter of Jeep, only came in once a year. It's not unusual. It could be related to the fact that she was inbred, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And then Miss Rowdy, she developed a uterine infection. I didn't find that out till, I believe I tried to breed her, she didn't take, and she had been bred before. So I took her to the vet. He told me she had a uterine infection, and it had scarred her uterus up so much that I shouldn't breed her. She couldn't produce pups anymore. Well, during conversations with dog men, especially Don Broke, I mentioned it to him because just in the conversation with dogs, and I just mentioned it to him. He told me, "Richard, send her here, man. I'll get her fixed up. I'll get her bred." I thought, okay. Vet told me one thing, he's telling me another thing, why not? So I basically gave Miss Rowdy to Don Broke, took her to his vet, cleaned up the infection. I don't know everything they did with her, whatever, this and that, and he bred her. In fact, he repeated the breeding I had made when I had his champion Ninja on my yard. I bred her to Miss Rowdy. That litter produced one of my best females, Lucy, and her brother Rowdy that broke campaign. He was a 2-time winner, 1-time loser. Another dog named Bo, who might have been the best of the litter, but he died as a young adult. He was a real good dog. And he repeated the breeding, and that's where Bugsy came from. The repeat breeding to Ninja, from Ninja to Miss Rowdy. I sold her to Rancherita Kennels, and she produced Champion Cyclone and Burrito and Ninja and Little Bugsy. Little Bugsy is behind that Champion Chamuco dog I talk about, who's sired by the Bean dog, the heavy red boy dog, bred to the Little Gator Bugsy stuff. The bottom side is all Rancherita breeding. They're known worldwide for producing a lot of good dogs. Angel, Black Angel, maybe not Black Angel, but their stuff is behind a lot of those dogs. Negrita and what was the other one? Dr. I forgot. He won in well over an hour. Dr. Rojas, Chido, I think his name was. Several dogs. Very good dogs come down from the Little Gator stuff, and I was proud that my little Bugsy bitch is in there. And I saw Chamuco back in the day as a top dog. But again, back on why they don't come in heat, there's a lot of different reasons why. And I'll just go through some random stuff I wrote down here. Health is always a major factor, and I always speak of preventative maintenance. And I'm not a vet, and I'm not a scientist. I can do research and I can read stuff just like anybody else, and all that helps. But diagnosing and all that stuff, you need a lot of experience with a particular disease or problem, or you need help of, back then we used a lot of vet techs and veterinarians in a lot of different parts of the country. You can still take your dogs to vets without any problem. So you need that, which is why I say preventative maintenance. And health-wise, your dog should be healthy. That requires a lot, not only healthy physically, mentally, nutritionally, but also their living quarters, the epigenetic parts of it. Some of the things that can develop why females don't come into heat, if they seem like they're healthy. I mean, they still run around happy, jumping, interact good with people. It could be a tumor developing. That's where you need x-rays and all that stuff. One thing that is rare in females, but it could happen, is their ovaries are not fully developed. So they'll never be able to have pups if they're not fully developed by the time they're an adult. Could be hyperthyroidism, different ailments. The only way to know is to have them checked. I had a friend who had a female. She died relatively young. She got sick, went down fast, took her in, didn't know what the problem was. She died within a few days. He had an autopsy done, and it turned out she only had one kidney. A lot of this stuff you don't know till after the fact. It's not anybody's fault, and it's very expensive to have them checked, especially nowadays. So that's why good breeding practices, using healthy individuals, using top individuals, proven individuals, whatever you want to call it, that's the main thing with these dogs or any animals that you raise and feed, whether it's livestock, sporting, working animals. They have to be healthy. They have to be tough and durable. One of the other things is malnutrition. You may think you're feeding a good diet, and it's important to research everything that you can and figure out what is a good, healthy, all-around diet for your dog. And that involves different stages of the dog's life. You're probably going to feed them different as a puppy than you would as an adult, and you may even feed them different as an older dog, which means more protein or less protein, more fat or less fat, certain minerals and vitamins at different stages in their life. And it's just a matter of research. Even if there isn't a lot of info, specific info, meaning you should feed this to a pup and you should feed this to an adult like that, your experience of feeding and interacting with them, meaning you're going to give them exercise, you're going to check their attitudes, how they feel, you're going to check their stools and their urine, you're going to check their gums, their lips, coloration, eyes, nose. You know, we've all heard since we were kids, you know, their nose should be moist and their eyes shouldn't be cloudy and they should have their tear ducts working properly, all this stuff that gives you indication that your dogs are healthy. And I always stress regular exercise. Regular exercise doesn't mean stressing the dog out every time you work it or pushing the dog to certain limits every time you go out and exercise them. It's just regular exercise. With me, it included doing something other than them being on the chain and active on the chain and active interacting with my family members. You know, hand walking, maybe do a little flirt pole on the chain. Maybe if you have a meal, do a couple of minutes at a time on the meal, 2 or 3 or 4 days a week. You know, it doesn't have to be a lot. And hand walking is like the mainstay of the dog world. So a lot of people do that. And depending on how your dog works, he's going to work harder when he walks or not so hard when he walks. But the point is you're getting them out there doing stuff, doing something. You monitor their weight. There's nothing wrong with weighing your dogs all the time, whether it's once a week, once a month, every day, 2-3 days a week, keeping notes. And with dogs that you're thinking about, back in the day we were thinking about conditioning, you monitored their weight more closely because you want to keep them at a certain weight before you start the work, and then of course you monitor it throughout the conditioning keep. So dogs need real meat, they need real fat, they need calcium, but not too much. These are females I'm talking about specifically, that you know that you're thinking about breeding. So the diet, like I said, should include real meat. With my females that I was gonna breed before and even during the heat cycle and during the pregnancy, we gave them beef, basically mostly for the iron content, and then the fat with whatever beef you're using. Even though my conditioned food was mostly chicken. I've used beef before, but I use chicken. But the red meat has more iron in it, and some people give liver. You can use that too. Liver has iron, B vitamins, different nutrients in it, trace elements and minerals. Like I said, some calcium, but not too much. If you're not sure how much is too much, there's graphs that you can find for the weight of the dog and what's normal just for everyday living, to find out, you know, how to increase it or whatever. There's not really anything on pit bull. It's mostly the experience of dogmen, but you can use other breeds that are used for sport and work, like greyhounds, Iditarod dogs. It'll give you some idea of what the increases are when you condition them compared to their everyday life. And you're looking basically for everyday life feed. So with females, you know, we increased the food when it was just about time. I had everything marked down when they were supposed to come and eat. And that's what I say when I didn't really have problems. When my females were supposed to come and eat, that's when they came and eat. It might be a little earlier that date or maybe a little later, but it's right around the same time every 6 months, except for Sissy. All the other ones, I never had an issue with them not coming and eat. And I attribute that to the ones I used were virile and had vigor, and they were healthy and exercised regularly. But with exercise, that's why I say just daily, regular exercise. Because exercising them too much, putting too much stress on a female and having them too light can cause them not to come in heat. I don't know the science behind it, but I know it's happened before. They're too thin and their body is too stressed, so there's some shut-off mechanism that tells them don't come in heat. Conversely, many people know you start putting a female through a keep and they'll come in heat. So it has that dual effect. It can bring them into heat, but if you continue on that path and keep working them and stressing them and pushing them, and they haven't come in heat, that pushing, stress, thinness, almost not being nutritionally healthy, can prevent them from coming in heat. Fiber, antioxidants, probiotics all help, And also you can check, what normal, just regular foods have these in them. You can buy stuff off the shelf, you can order stuff, and if it's concentrated, it's more easily digestible. But there's foods that have it, basically any something like wheat or oats or something like that has fiber. Antioxidants could be blueberries, probiotic could be yogurt. You just figure out what you want to feed or how you want to administer it. And again, if you're not sure, give less. I always gave less than the recommended dosage because they were well fed and they didn't need that much. It wasn't a big transition from my dogs being on the chain to being in condition. There's an increase in 5, 10, 15, whatever percentage it was, but it wasn't a big percentage difference from them being on the chain and them being in condition, because they were always fit. And they had weight on them, but they were still fit. Even if they were heavy, they were still fit. Even my females that I was adding weight to, because they're going to need that extra nutrition for the development of their pups, and as their pups are growing, and afterwards, after they're born, we're fit. We exercise them, just like humans do. Doctors advise women get exercise, not stressful exercise. It could cause a miscarriage, could cause them to get too wound up or too excited. They could jump around and hit their stomach, bump themselves, something, right? So, also in that situation, females in heat and females in whelp and pregnant and all that stuff, we kept them separated. They weren't around other dogs because we didn't want to get them worked up, cause a problem during their pregnancy or even afterwards. They'll get excited and hurt the pups or even kill them sometimes. They just get too wound up. So we always kept them separate, inside or the house or outside the house, either way. So excessive physical activity, they're overworked, too lean, that can cause them not to come in heat. Too many medications, that's why I stressed before, we didn't go give our dogs a shot of antibiotics every time they got a sniffle or even cuts. Even back in the day when I was rolling my dogs, if they weren't hurt too bad, I basically didn't give them nothing. I just cleaned the wounds. At some point, we acquired betadine and like that, but before that, we just used soap and water. Sometimes I even used salt water. People used to criticize me back in the day, oh, that stings and that, that hurts them and this and that. Yeah, but it cleans them out. And considering what they just went through in the roll, I don't think salt water is going to bother them too much. I never had them wince from it or run away from it or cry or scream. They went through a lot more than some salt water, but salt water cleans them. You can use alcohol. Some people even use hydrogen peroxide. I don't like to use hydrogen peroxide on deep wounds because it destroys the tissue. Other people do it, right? Some people with mouth injuries, they use Listerine. You have to check everything and make sure they're clean. Just like females, you got to make sure they're in a clean environment. They rub their breasts on everything, so that the surface has to be clean. They're sitting down, so their vagina has to be in a clean area. You know, dogs are pretty hardy, and not that dirt or anything like that is going to cause major problems, but because they're enclosed, they're confined to a certain area, they don't get to move around a lot, whether it's piss or shit or something on the ground, chemicals that you spray or whatever it is. The problems can develop from that. So even though I use bleach and we use malathion, all this stuff, we always made sure the area was diluted with water afterwards and dry before we put the animals back in their area. I didn't just spray, bleach while the dog was there and hopefully it don't get on them and this and that and let them walk around in it. No, none of that. We removed each dog, clean the area. It's a long process. Leave them out of the area until everything's dried and clean and all that, no more smell, water it down, wait for it to dry, and then you put the dog back on, right? So the medications can cause that, just like an infection in their uterus or just a regular infection can cause that. If it's a slight infection, dogs, like people, they can live with those infections for a long time. They're not even noticeable. And unless you're taking your dog's temperature daily or regularly, you don't even know it. And some people give antibiotics as a preventative, which I don't see anything wrong with that. But if you're doing it a lot and you're giving it to them every time you think there's a problem, or you yourself are misdiagnosing them, I'm going to give them this, and I'm going to give them ampicillin, then I'm going to give them some Baytril, I'm going to give them, it should be specific for the dog. And a lot of antibiotics, they are all around antibiotics. We had one back in the day called Combiotic. It was a combination of penicillin and maybe amoxicillin or something like that. It's good all around antibiotic. But I wasn't sticking my dog every time. Like I said, they had a sniffle. Just, I don't think that's healthy. They build up resistance to it, then it don't work. Then you got to give them more. You have to increase it. Just like deworm. I didn't deworm my dogs all the time like they do now. I don't know if deworming can affect a female's heat cycle, but I think too much of anything is not good, including deworming your dogs. Unless you're having it checked or learn how to do it yourself, buy a microscope and learn what to look for and what the different worms look like. Just for me, maybe the medicine has changed, the deworming medicine has changed, and it's not so powerful or not so strong or whatever the reason. Maybe you can deworm them more now than you could back in the day. I just didn't like doing it because too much of anything, like I said, is not good. Another thing is just a lack of exposure to other females in heat. There's that natural instinct where females, if they're around other females throughout their life that come in heat, they smell it. It's a natural instinct. It could help them with their heat cycle too. That's one of the things we always talk about in groups. Hey, my female not in heat, what can I do? The two things they say most is exercise them if they're too heavy, and put them by a female that's in heat. Or, that smell doesn't go away for a long time. It could have been a female that was in heat a month ago in that area, and you just change her out with the one that you want to come in heat. So she's in that area, even though female around her is not in heat. She's in the area where that female that was in heat was there previously. So that smell is still there, and it could help bring them in. I mentioned infection of the uterus. That's a big one. Also, lack of vitamin B and D. Believe it or not, the way some people kept their dogs, they do have lack of vitamins. So that's another reason where I supplemented my dogs, just to make sure they had all the vitamin and minerals they needed. I didn't give the recommended dosage. It was less. Less is better than none, and it's always better than too much. And believe it or not, a lot of dogs, depending on where you live, where people live, and where they were kept, they didn't get a lot of sunlight. Sunlight, the number one thing, vitamin D. That could cause a female not to come in heat also. All mammals, at least, need vitamin D. And without realizing it, you may take your dog out, even, let's say you keep them kenneled inside a building or inside your home. There's no sunlight coming in. They're not getting enough. And even though you may take them out to empty or you may take them out to exercise, even if you do it every day, that's nothing compared to if your dog is out on a chain or out in a kennel where the sun comes in all throughout the day. So they get that sunlight. Even if you have shade for them, even if it's hot, they got to get up and go to the bathroom and move around, and then you're going to feed them. And along with that, taking them out and walking them around and all that stuff, exercising them. Just having sunlight available to them all during the day is better than keeping them inside a building or inside a kennel. They have these kennels now where it's all, fancy first class, They have windows in them, but the light doesn't generally go directly on the dogs. And unless you have those big hot lights that mimic the sun, there's still a lack of sunlight that they're getting. So that's very important. They need sunlight. Another thing I get feedback on and sometimes backlash on is age. Everything gets too old to be viable. And what I've noticed with my dogs and other people's dogs is it's usually the females first. Meaning, I could breed my females up to, generally after 5 years old I didn't breed them, but I bred them up to 7 years old, and that was pretty much my limit. Doesn't mean they can't have pups after that, doesn't mean that they can't get pregnant after that, but for me it meant the quality was not the same. And I did that with a few of my females to at least have that observation and make that comparison. It was true. They threw better when they were younger. Even where I saw repeat breedings. I mentioned Ninja Timus Rowdy. The second litter was good, but not as good as the first litter. That is just one. Same thing with Sissy. She threw good when she was younger, not as good when she got older. So age meant a lot to me, because with age comes good health, good immune system, vitality, vigor, durability, good bone, good mental health. All that mattered to me. So age can be a factor. Guys can look all this up. You'll hear different sides of it and come to your own conclusions. But the best way to find that out, anything out, is do it yourself through your own processes. And finally, I want to talk about inbreeding, because I've been talking about breedings these last several videos. Most of it is on inbreeding, father-daughter, mother-son, back breeding, line breeding, inbreeding. It's different videos I've been done, and I do that mostly because people want some type of information, and I do have experience with it and results from it. But at the same time, I'm not a big fan of inbreeding or too much inbreeding. It has its place, but there's a thing, I forget what the letters stand for, but it's called AL or something. It has to do with inbreeding coefficient. And we all know what hybrid vigor is. Hybrid vigor comes when you breed two dogs that are not related, and outcross, basically. That's where the term hybrid vigor is developed from, because they're outcrosses. It's a hybrid, two unrelated dogs put together. But that doesn't mean within your inbreedings, line breedings, close, tight, whatever it is, 3/4, 25%, and 66, 33, however you want to look at it. Line breeding, inbreeding. It doesn't mean there should be a loss of vigor or vitality, and mostly vigor, because hybrid vigor is not the same as just vigor. You still need it. Doesn't matter if the dogs are inbred. Still got to have it. Just like youth matters to me, health matters to me a lot with tight breedings. So it's called AL, but basically what it revolves around is when you inbreed, for every, let's say for every 10% of inbreeding you do, there's a 10% chance of the litters becoming smaller. That's why you'll notice when people talk about inbreeding, they'll say a lot of times you get small litters. Doesn't happen in every case, just generally speaking, over time, the more inbreeding you do, the smaller the size of your litters are going to be. So when your coefficient becomes 10%, there's a 10% chance to decrease in size of your litters. If it's 20%, 20% decrease in the size of your litters, all the way up to what? 100%. And that's why with a lot of these inbreeds, if they're heavily inbred dogs, females don't come in heat. They don't produce litters. I don't know the science behind it, but I know it's a fact. Does that mean that every type breeding or inbreeding produces small litters? No. But if you keep doing it over and over again, that's going to be the norm rather than the exception. The last breeding I did, I'll admit, 3 cc's, artificial insemination, got 11 pups, and they were tight bred dogs. But not just from that one, but from all the other tight bred breedings I did, I got a lot of smaller litters. Sometimes I got 1 pup. Sometimes I got 2 pups. Sometimes I got 4. And 4, with the kind of line breeding I did, 4 was generally the average number. I would get 4 pups. Sometimes I got 6, sometimes I got 8, and like I said, in this one example, there was 11. But the average for those tight breedings was 4 pups. But again, you have to know the background of dogs, you have to know the pedigrees, you have to know where everything's coming from. Because what may look tight to some person, unless you do your research, it's not really that tight. Even though all the dogs in the pedigree are related, there's several different crosses in there, and the relations are not immediate relations, could be the same bloodline, or it could be distant, where the same female is in the 3rd generation as it is in the 4th generation. It's at different spots, but the males they were bred to were different. So you have to take all that into consideration. And it's something that inbreeding, not just can cause the downfall of your dogs or your family or whatever, it can cause infertility. And infertility is extinction. So it used to be, again, I'll mention it, in the past, that people thought that animals in the wild heavily inbred. And research has shown that they didn't. No matter what anybody says, they didn't. So that's nature's way of telling you that inbreeding, when it goes too far, is not good, because the species has to proliferate, has to keep going. Inbreeding too much can cause extinction. That's why they don't do it. I would say that's the main reason they don't do it, along with health and vigor and vitality and structure and all that stuff. So it's something you can look up. It's called AL, I think, if I remember correctly, from back in the day. There's a lot of stuff I studied, and I don't even remember a lot of it, but sometimes it pops up in my head, and I can at least mention it. And if I wasn't so lazy, I might have done some research on it beforehand. But it's just something that I wanted to bring up, because the point is not how far you can go or how much you can inbreed or what's the good and what's this and that. The fact of the matter is however you decide to inbreed, you need to have some standards for your dogs. And health and vitality and vigor should be number 1, all along with a good immune system, healthy mind and healthy body. Youth matters. So you can check out that AL thing. Maybe it's called AI or something, but I think it was called AL. And it just means that for every time you increase the inbreeding coefficient, there's a chance that you could have that decrease, that same percentage decrease in litter size. So thanks again for your support. Hope you liked the vid. Feel free to comment, ask questions. Much appreciated.